Welcome to the Interstice podcast, episode 53, crushing along now. Wanted to say a big thank you to everybody listening, everybody who's supporting me on Patreon. That's how the show continues to roll on and continues to evolve. You guys are all great. Thank you very much. Now, I've made a list this time over the course of this week that we would have topics to discuss. And once again, if your thing is that you enjoy me randomly jumping around everywhere, you will enjoy this episode. If you are driven mad by that, this may be the last straw, because it really is all over the place. But let's start with the topic very near and dear to my heart, and this is the concept of teacher, creator, student. So I think about what is the way that we can best live our lives, and some people, you will say, very hot on Instagram right now. It's like this comedian who I quite like. He's just quoted saying, enjoying the passage of time. That's it. Enjoying the passage of time. 5 words. But then, of course, he's distilled it. He's narrowed it down there. But I think what then allows us to enjoy the passage of time, that could be eating a bunch of gummy bears, that could be running, that could be ultra-violence. I don't know what it is for each individual person, but for me, my subjective reality, I came up with a theory so far, and it is based around these concepts: teacher, creator, student. And it is basically that we fulfill ourselves in fulfilling these roles, and there is no point in our life that need exclude us from any one of them. So we usually think about being a student only as this first 18 years of our life, but I think it's pretty obvious that that need never stop. I think some of the most brilliant people in the world, they have what they call the beginner's mind, where you do not make the mistakes of someone who assumes they know everything, bringing this sort of I don't have the answers for everything mindset to whatever it is that you're doing can be really, really beneficial in granting you insight or added perceptiveness in what others may not have seen when they think they already know the solution because they already have so much experience. Now, that's talking about problem solving strictly in terms of being in a job or something like that. But I think just being a student, there is something so incredibly rewarding in learning. This, I don't know that one of these is ahead of the other. Like if it's simply a circle, I would say these 3 concepts, because you don't need one for the other really, but they're all equally important. So just always to learn, always to be a student, and you are going to be hitting a dopamine button all the time when it is that you are learning something new. I have a friend, for example, that it must be incredibly rewarding for her, where I was told she makes this incredible bread now, and for a time she went and for, I don't know if it was over a month, but she dedicated herself to watching these YouTube tutorials and refining her skill and getting better and better and better at it, until she's very much, from what I hear reports of the quality of her bread, sourdough particularly, is off the charts. And for someone like me who appreciates a good sourdough, who misses a good sourdough, I think that's a great example of, no matter how old you are, applying yourself to being a student, and also not thinking that you just need to be a student for some sort of job that you're doing. Be a student for the joy of learning, because learning feels great, because learning is, like all of these in some way, it's an affirmation of what we are capable of. To be able to learn is to be able to change, and to be able to change is to be able to grow. So it's incredibly important that we always do that. So that's the one concept there. Well, then you have teacher. I think that there is something, I think it is most absolutely true that when we are able to pass on our knowledge to someone, that there is a great fulfillment in that. There's sort of, we feel ourselves existing more as in a continuum, and less like when we cease to exist, that there will be a full stop. So to teach is to grant yourself a kind of immortality, because you are connected to this thread of knowledge that's continuing onwards. And who wouldn't enjoy feeling some sort of continuity, and that they aren't some sort of irrelevant blip that just shows up and disappears? What would they say? There was a great, more useless than tits on a hog or something like that. I can't remember. My dad had a great expression for this. You don't want to be more useless than tits on a hog, you know? Let's continue to develop this idea of teaching. So in teaching as well, I think there's something, if you're a good teacher recognizes that obviously every single student is different, and there is a lot in teaching that isn't simply passing on knowledge, but it's in identifying the character in people. So if you are someone who is able to read others well, then you are likely going to be a good teacher. And if you aspire to be a good teacher, if you want to convey to somebody whatever it is that you've learned, and you want to do that as best you can, egoless as possible, then you will do so by opening up your mind to understanding the way in which the world is different from you, the way in which this pupil is different from you, the way in which people are individuals. And that's really, really important. And also, I think when we do that, we see as well where, if you're a good teacher, you may have presupposed that the world is one way, but again, you're able to see it in another, because you realize that you had thought, oh, someone can only learn this way, someone can only do something this way. But when you open your mind up to like, oh, I can see that a student is learning in this way. I never knew that someone could learn like that. And then all of a sudden your world is turned upside down because you're able to see potential that wasn't there before. Kind of in a strange way, a strange universalism here, it's the sort of same thing that you see as the student. There was a world that you hadn't imagined before, and now you can imagine it, and there's a way in which of passing down knowledge, or that someone could succeed as a teacher, which you hadn't seen before, but now you are. And so you're always broadening your perspective, and that's what happens when you are a good teacher. Satisfying to be able to pass along something of value, to pass along a part of yourself, in fact, as you teach, but also to see the world in a different way. And then I think also this sense of mentoring is incredibly valuable. Like I was, again, having a conversation recently with a friend about how there are these different forms of love. In, I believe it's the Greek tradition, there's agape, which is like universal love. Then there's philusia, which is self-love. There's eros, which is that's like lustful. And then there's like there's one for friends, there's ones for this, there's ones for that. But kind of connecting to this idea that I'm sharing here, whether it's learning or teaching, that there's all these different types of ways to experience knowing the world in a different way. You can know love in 7 different ways. You can know knowing the world in a variety of different ways. And this is actually a topic I've had before, I think, I don't know how many podcasts ago, but it's like it relates to the idea that the more that we words shape our sense of the world. So to be able to say that something is hard or harder, you've now opened up the concept of that there are degrees of hardness. If you just say hard, that excludes that there are all these different degrees of things. And when you add more words into your vocabulary, you are actually adding to your existence, because you can see and describe and experience your existence in a more nuanced way. And you are adding to your existence to be able to see how people can learn differently, to see how you might learn differently. And think of when you hadn't seen something amazing and then you had, and how different you felt afterwards. Probably felt like it was worth adding to your experience, that now you can see beautiful things, you'd like to see more beautiful things. I feel like this rings true for the sort of value of being these 2 archetypes. And then the final one, this one's really, really interesting to me. It's like, I kind of wonder about, well, I know personally because I create stuff. So I was thinking that there is something very, very obvious to me about why it is good to not just be a student, not just be good to be a teacher, but also to be a creator, in that you experience kind of like this is They're all tied into the universe in like fundamental ways in which the systems, the processes of the universe carry out, teaching things, handing things along, learning things, evolution. But creation, what could be more fundamental to the universe than creation? So forget that when you make cupcakes, they're delicious. You are tapping into, when you create something, a primal force that surrounds us that I think makes us feel more a part of the whole. You really do feel like a part of something when you create something. You could see this just in anything. I mean, I really appreciate it as I look out more and I watch more Instagram reels, and you see how many veins of creation there are. It really, provided it doesn't hurt anyone else, it really doesn't matter what it is that you create. If you can do it that it would support your livelihood, that you're so into it that you want it to do that for you, that's fantastic. But it needn't be that. It doesn't have to be that this thing that you create is what supports you. Maybe it would be nice if it did, but that is not the point of creation. I think creation is, again, it's to be able to see that we can change, because when we create, just like a part of creation is very much being a student, we always evolve what we create in. And so it's another example to ourselves how we can change, how I don't know why I feel like I need this connection to well, actually I do. It's really, really scary whenever we make a mistake, because we feel like we are the mistake, and we feel like this is it now. I made the mistake, I am the mistake is forever. But when we participate in things like when we participate in things that show us that we can change whenever we confront these difficulties, then we're more able to see past them, and that this is simply a moment along the path, and it too shall pass, and things can be okay. That's putting it in a more like existential sort of context, to consider how creating things gives you relief from your existential fears, where it's just a lot of fun too. I think that when we do this, it's a lot of fun. And another aspect, it's interesting to see all of the carryovers from each other, but another one I would say in creation, which is so important, where it will be, usually there's some aspect of creation or many creative acts that are done solitarily, but so much of creation is community, because again, not every single person will create that someone might see what they do, or maybe it's limited to a very, very small group of people who are going to experience what it is that you create. But it's very often the case that whatever it is that you create is going to be experienced by other people, and it's going to be a way to share yourself. And there is very often a sort of virtuous feedback loop in where when you create something, it's valuable to another person, and then they reflect that back at you. That then makes you want to create more, and so on and so forth. So the virtuous cycle continues. And so you're really tapping into, I use the word archetypes. They all blend into each other, but in their base form, it's something that I think is really, really important to us, that we feel like we be able to learn, that we feel like we be able to teach, that we know that we be able to create something. If you can check those boxes off in your life, and a lot of people might say, oh, I don't do these things, but if you looked carefully, you may notice that you do, because don't confine them, when you consider this, to exactly the way that we might think about it. So when people say I'm a student, well, they would immediately think, well, I'm not studying anything in university right now or going to a college. Oh, I'm not a teacher. I'm not teaching anybody piano lessons. Oh, I'm not creating anything. I'm not an engineer. But then at another glance, at another comb through here, you'd realize, oh, well, I have a really good relationship with my partner, and I taught them recently about this part of the world that they didn't know about. You're a teacher. You may have a horrible habit or something, and then one of your friends says, you'd be far better off, and I would hate you far less if you would stop doing this thing. And now you're a student. You're learning. Isn't that nice? And then as far as creation goes, I think that the best one with this is where I'm trying to show how it doesn't need to be. I'm trying to show you how it is not always how you expect it to be. You might think, well, there's nothing materially that I create. Nothing. I don't even make Legos. So no, I am not a creator. Well, when you're with your friends, maybe you're the funniest person in the group and you create good times. You turn this water to funk, like that kind of thing. And so creators can be creating immaterially as well as materially, and it's really how we kind of shift our perspective around. Now, that gives people lots of room to be able to explore the concepts and to be able to take part in them. But the reason I bring them up is because even with all that flexibility throughout all of these, that in a lot of cases, people aren't doing that. They have grown so stagnant to the point where they don't learn anything. And where I would say you can probably notice this most is if you're feeling down day to day and nothing is changing. I suppose even as I have this conversation with you now, I'm seeing like maybe the greatest universal between all of them is that they are markers of change. When you teach, you're changing something. When you learn, you change something. When you create, you change something. And so maybe the best way to identify it in your own life is to feel as though, have you become stagnant? Are you always doing the same thing? Are you always having the same thoughts? Are you always feeling like nothing is different from day to day? And that could be a way to identify whether or not this is something in your life. I don't mean to guru you at all either. There's no guruing going on here. Like maybe this is not something that people prescribe to, but I think when I've looked around at the people that I see most successful and happy, whether they've described what it is that they're doing in life exactly as I have, where they wake up each day and say, I am a student, a teacher, a creator, they're doing it anyways. And so it's irrelevant what exactly we call it. We have to remember, as Alan Watts tells us, that words are not the thing they describe. Everything is a symbol in the spoken language. Now, that's a lot of fun. I didn't think I would get this amount of time discussing that, so I was a little worried. But let's continue now. Maybe what I'll do is... No, let's not talk about format here. Let's just keep going. I saw this thing again where social media doesn't need to be bad. Louis C.K., I believe he had his show, Louis, for a while. Incredible writing, really, really good. And there's a clip where he's talking about how, this is on an Instagram reel that I saw where it's a clip from the show, and he was talking about how it just sucks that this woman that he loved is gone, and if this is what it was all for, that you go through all this effort of loving someone only to have this ultimate feeling of it be sadness and loss, that why would you ever do that? And love then is this horrible thing that he doesn't want. He doesn't want no part of that anymore. And the character that he's speaking to, and I think it's a really good concept, then says that you've actually got it all wrong. He says that all that stuff when you're together, when it's easy, when you're in their company, when you're kissing them, you're enjoying their time, you're going places together, it's a part of love, but it's not, you don't know it yet. You don't know that it's the full thing. And he says that when you really know that you've loved someone is when you've lost them, and that this absence and the way that it makes you feel is so important to let you know that it was this great feeling, and that if you've lost somebody and it causes a great pain for you, that is a way to know that you really had something worth having. And I've had this thought as well. I actually I did a video on it on my channel a while ago, where there's even like some Marcus Aurelius quote. I actually did it half decent in the video that I made, but I'll try and do it now. I'll just like shoot from the hip. It was essentially that lucky is the man that in his friend's absence still makes them smile. I think that was it. And I appreciate this because I live abroad and I don't see my family. I haven't seen my family in 5 years because of the state of the world, and a few other like difficult things that happen in my life. But then the way that I've managed that is to absolutely feel grateful that there is this pain that's there. I would be far more worried if they were not around and I felt nothing. I also, and the guy says also in this clip, and this is another great point, I'll circle back to a book that I once read a while ago that deals with this idea, where he said the true like sadness, the true loss is, just as I said now, this absence of feeling. If it's a vacuum and a void that you feel in terms of people when you consider how you love them, then that is tragic. And there's this old series, I wonder who I'll catch with this, who maybe read it when they were younger. I mean, not that it's not still around today, but I think it was very, very popular back when I was a teenager and going through high school. It was called Dragonlance. And I read this series for ages until like the main characters that I read had grown and then had children, and then their children died, and so on. And there was the final confrontation, which kind of like wrapped up the series. Was like, we're finishing this, and where there were all these opponents. There were good gods and bad gods and neutral gods, a sort of a Greek approach to gods being more imbued with the kind of emotions that we as humans have in our everyday lives. And the big bad that they have to face at the end is chaos. And what chaos does, or chaos's minions, is that when they kill you, it's not that they just kill you and you die. It's that it describes at one point all these guys on the ramparts fighting them as they are trying to climb up the walls of the castle. It's that if their blades, if their weapons touch you, it cuts you from existence, and everyone who was looking at them as they were fighting the demons, when they're gone, they just disappear from space. They can't remember who was there, and it's as though they never existed. And I couldn't think of something more cruel. I mean, on another level, I guess this is going into sort of like Sunshine on the Spotless Mind. Like, would it be better to not know someone at all than to know the pain of having lost them? I swear, I think it is far, far worse that you would lose the experience of ever knowing them. And I love that in the book. I was like, that really is one of the most horrifying things I could possibly imagine. Good job, young adult fiction. Although I suppose adults enjoyed that series as well. It was so good, and this was cool. I love getting a little bit, where we can be so down on social media, where I'm like, oh, this was some very cool social media. It had some real wisdom there, which was awesome. We're getting so quickly to the second half of this, but I'm just going to keep going on through. Let's go with this one because it'll be a little bit shorter. So I'm a big fan of different shows that you could watch. I was hyping it to people that they should check out the show Arcane. And I'm glad to hear like a few people in the comments and contacted me, and they checked out Arcane, this Matrix event like nothing we've ever seen before. This is something else I learned recently. Arcane, which is an animation, was done, I believe, with $100 million, which, when I say that, it sounds like a ton of money, right? And it is. But when you compare the quality of this show that looks way better, or as good, if not way better stylistically, than anything I've ever seen done by Disney, and the Disney movies average is about 250 million, is crazy. Like, what an evolution of what's possible. Anyways, we were talking about that on the podcast before. The one I would like to encourage people to go check out now. I've only seen 2 episodes. One of them was quite weak. I was like, I'm enjoying how weak this is, because I like to critically analyze things and feel like I'm sharpening my blade to be able to see what is good or is bad in a show that I watch. But that was one episode of Love, Death, and Robots. It's on its 3rd season now. The second episode that we watched was awesome. Incredible animation, great storytelling, very original, very interesting, just wonderful. So if you don't know, Love, Death, and Robots is an anthology. It's 9 stories, 9 short animations that are told, and they are their own self-contained world. I believe that's what the anthology part of it is that they do not have to be a continuous storyline. They can be their own. It's their own animators, it's their own story writers, it's their own everything. Everyone is individual, working on their own separate projects. It is not episodic, although there is a theme, which you might have guessed: Love, Death, and Robots. It's almost like the Black Mirror of animation. I wouldn't be surprised if that came up in the pitch meeting when they were making this thing happen. The first season was 15 episodes, of which 4 were good. Then the second season was about 6 episodes, of which 6 were good. And then this third season, I'm already impressed that we've already got 50-50 starting out of the gates here, and there's 9 episodes to watch. And you could watch it for the different stories being so good. You could watch it for the animation being so unique and individual for each. There's just a million different reasons to watch it, and they're really good. Not always, but sort of they're sort of like the zeitgeist, the spirit of what it is that we're capable of right now. And I love seeing that. I can't go on at length because I only watched 2 episodes, but already, if you've not seen that, I would highly recommend checking it out. And I would recommend checking out the previous seasons as well. If I were to recommend some of my favorite episodes, it would be Snow in the Desert, Pop Squad, Good Hunting. That's sort of this crazy steampunk one. What's some other ones that I enjoyed? Sonya's Edge, which is based on a short story written by my favorite author, Peter F. Hamilton, which I was shocked to see actually made it into an animation. And as I watched it, I didn't know that it was him who had written the story, but I could feel that it was, and said to myself, this feels really Peter F. Hamilton-ish. But then when I looked it up, confirmed, and felt like the boss. It was so cool. They're really, really good. Well worth checking out. That wraps up the first half. I'm so happy. I didn't think I'd be so successful with being able to ramble for so long. But let's reset and let's get into the second half of this. Part 2. Here we go. Off to the races. Finishing up. Nothing more really to be said about Love, Death, and Robots, because there's other stuff that we can get into here, and that was more like, hey, I want to get you involved with that. So what I was going to talk about, this is a little bit more along the animation. This will be actually a bit more media discussion, but then I do have another sort of social topic, which I think is cool, related to a post I made on Instagram today. Let's talk about, since I did Love, Death, and Robots, I think a kind of cool thing to move on into is to discuss where will we go in the coming years in terms of blending animation, blending reality, what CG is, what it will become, and a couple of different things that have just been so insane. So I'll start from a simple way that I would talk about blending animation. I've always enjoyed this, even in the old school way that it gets used, and I think that this could be brought into the new school in really, really interesting ways. So when I say old school, I mean something like the movie I never saw, but I would love to if I could find a copy of this somewhere, Cool World. It was with Brad Pitt, and it was a more adult Who Framed Roger Rabbit, although Roger Rabbit was quite mature. I don't know how, I remember, this is how, dating myself here, calling the theaters to figure out when the movie would be released in the theaters, and it just never showing up there. But then another sort of old school blending animation with film would be something like Roger Rabbit, which is a timeless classic. You can watch that today and it's still really good. It's really, really, really cool when they bring these two worlds together. And then there's a guy I've talked about in other podcasts, an incredible, he popularized a lot of these travel videos that you see. His name's Sam Colder. He's a fantastic editor, done great work. I haven't checked out his stuff more recently, but I think he's just cruising along with an incredible following, doing very, very well for himself. And he told a quite touching story of his life where he lost his brother when he was younger. Not that he's too old, but lost his brother when he was younger. And in that YouTube video, he collaborated with a guy that at parts of it, it's animated. And then that animation will return to regular film, and then that film will return to animation. And I love these blending of worlds together. And I think that there is such potential, and it's kind of symbolic of the way in which our whole world is going when you look at things like VR is kind of this other layer on our own reality that we have. When you have augmented reality, I believe I just heard in the news the other day, Apple, I don't know if it was leaked or if they've officially announced, but they're going to have an augmented reality headset, and you can imagine how incredibly crazy that's going to be. And I like it because, kind of hearkening back to what I was saying in the last podcast, is that where life is very much kind of a shared hallucination. We all agree that we're hallucinating the same thing, that our brains are just these little chemical factories that are allowing us to have the subjective experience that we do, which is basically electrical signals in a brain, which means I can look out from my eyes and see everything around me, that heat is converted into temperature on my skin, that light is converted to the images that I see, that vibrations become sound. This whole layers and layers of reality, I like to think of that generally in my everyday life, but then to think of how we could continually apply this creatively. Now, it was weird to me recently just seeing okay, well, it's kind of, again, I use that word zeitgeist. It's the spirit of the times right now, where this technology of deep fakes is becoming more and more prevalent. And we've seen a lot of stuff do it. We've seen, if you go on to YouTube or something, you could watch, for example, Terminator 2, but a deep fake that now has Sylvester Stallone's face as opposed to Arnold Schwarzenegger's on the T-100 Terminator body, as he's in the bar at the beginning getting his motorcycle in his boots. And that's a sort of example of deep fakes. And I wondered, aside from being purely novel, what are some more interesting ways that we might see this sort of animation, this CG, this blending of realities start to show up in our creative works? And it was so interesting to me, and I'm so glad I got my buddy Sandro, who's really into hip-hop, and Kendrick Lamar, that he showed me the new video from Kendrick. And so Kendrick is, without even knowing that much, just kind of vicariously through Sandro, I've come to appreciate what an influence Kendrick Lamar is on the whole culture, the whole black culture, black hip-hop culture, of course. Naturally, that's the art form that he's in, but black culture in general, as a person who speaks for that culture. And then in his most recent video, or one of his most recent videos, where it's him against a sort of maroon, ruby, blood red, not blood, darkened blood, I think maroon was a better description, background, and he is singing in front of it, except they use deep fakes to then change his face to different people in the black community as he's rapping. And as you might imagine, that the lyrics at times are to be reflective of the face that he has on at that moment. And what an insanely creative way to use deep fakes, right? It's not just for porn. It's not just for power harassment now, where you can put somebody's face onto anybody's body. That it be used in this way, it excites me, because I see, yet again, an example of the triumphant human spirits who go on and create never-before-seen things, but that relate a personal experience which is very, very human, that technology could be so leveraged for humanity as opposed to, I don't know, the newest, coolest thing, or pure entertainment, that you could be a social commentary as opposed to popcorn, is a really, really cool thing. So that came out, And I was like, wow, that's really, really cool. That's impressive. But then at the same time, it seems that who's that guy? He's wrote a few rap songs. Kanye. Kanye also went and did the same thing. And not the exact same thing, but he used deep fake technology to be able to put his face or the faces of his old photos from school and stuff like that, that those faces would be able to rap the lyrics to his song. I love seeing art pushing things forward. Say what you will about Kanye. That's a very, very creative idea. That's a fantastic idea. And I like to be surprised. I like to be reminded that we haven't seen it all and that, it's all just beginning. And these two really did that. I wondered, how would this animation, how would this new technology find its way into our art? You would see it in like MCU movies with de-aging was popular. That was a popular thing to do. They've done it in MCU. They've done it in I don't know, whatever new gangster movie came out not too long ago where like Al Pacino was like de-aged and stuff like that. But this to me was pushing it far more creatively. It made me think, oh, what's some like other things that you could do with this? And so I love to imagine that and to think, what does the future of cinema and entertainment and identity mean when anybody can look like anyone so long as it's on a screen? And then, well, will it always be on a screen, or could we just eventually do that in our day-to-day lives as we walk around? And how apparent it is that our lives are a simulation continues to grow, where you kind of have hints of it, and the only way to get into it now was, I should say, a kind of philosophical discussion of the science which gives rise to our subjective reality. But now you're like, well, no, literally you can look and see whatever you want. Just put these glasses on and life is different, and you can see dragons or space slugs or whatever it may be. But it's going in a wild direction. And to see these artists pushing outwards, where I love entertainment too. I don't ever want to come across in a discussion of this like, I don't like things that are purely entertaining. Not true. I love purely entertaining things. Movies that don't have anything really to say other than let's have a great time. That's cool. I love a lot of music in that same way, where it's like, this is just fun. I like that. But I like it all. I like to see things pushed in every direction, and it seems to me that things are most heavily pushed towards entertainment. And so I guess that's why I'm especially impressed or especially interested by things that aren't so immediately hyper palatable, but much like our vegetables, are very, very good for us. And that is something that Kendrick Lamar has done here, as well as Kanye, to show us like, oh, you could use it to give a voice to this kind of experience. It's very, very cool. I really enjoyed that, and I'm very, very grateful to Sandro for introducing me to that, because it's just not something I would have gotten into as much before. Also, really, really beautiful song. He had us listen to it last night. It was Anti-Diaries, and anti referring not like the anti-diary or the Antichrist or something. It was referring to the Anti-Diaries is a song that has Lamar singing about his aunt who's transgender. And I thought, Sandro said it really well. We were talking about it the other night. He was talking about, like, you just think about the spotlight that this guy has on him, everything that he could do with that spotlight, and he gives voice to this sort of, this incredibly compassionate song. It was really beautiful. And where the couple that I've heard are much harder, they're like, I was describing it, and I thought, I was like, oh, kind of serendipitously, I said the right thing, where, how would I describe Lamar? And I was like, oh, I would say it's sort of like rap jazz. That's how I would describe it. The way it's like, like syncopated, offbeat, crazy, complex, difficult, highly hyper skilled, but not at first easy to listen to. That kind of thing this was super mellow and quite melodic, and yeah, very, 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 again, extremely thoughtful. So I really, really enjoyed that. That's saying nothing of animation and blending reality and all that kind of stuff, but it was impressive to me, like stunning and brave, that a guy in his position, and as I've understood, talk about like this topic is difficult for a lot of people to discuss anything to do with people who are transgendered, or it's a difficult topic for people. Just sexuality is a big difficult topic. I don't give a fuck, but a lot of people do. And I know particularly, or I've heard particularly, I have some sense that in the black communities this is a really difficult topic, particularly like being gay, being of a different sexuality, or being transgendered. So I was like, wow, really impressive, man. This is something that you are stunning and brave to have approached. So I would like to listen to more of the album. I when I say that it's tough, like, it's impressive. One of the other songs that was on it, who knew I was going to talk about Kendrick Lamar? I didn't know. This is cool. It fit into the technology thing, but now it just fits into the other cool stuff on the album. Another one of his songs, again, he's like, nothing can be radio friendly. None of this. The song is him and a woman, and basically it's them having an argument, and it's them airing out what it is that pisses each other off about each other, and it's them screaming back and forth. But it's incredible rhyme, and it's, of course, I mean, when you can think of a time, what time is more emotive and effusive than when you're really, really pissed off at somebody and you don't know how to handle that, and this person is the person that you loved, you cared for, or something. And it was very, very, very powerful. It's tough to listen to, because it's quite draining to listen to anyone scream and argue. I don't recommend it in the long term, but as a creative experiment, it's really cool. And I could listen to it, like, I mean, I listened to the song once, but it was interesting. At first, I almost felt like it was the female voice in the song that was giving more space to air its opinions, but it wasn't. I mean, or I don't think it was. It was weird how I like had that impression. I was like, oh, this is more like dude gets to say his little bit, but this is finally a chance, like, for this woman to unload on how she feels mistreated and underappreciated in the relationship. It just great concepts. So that music video is a very, very intelligent concept. The concept of this argument, very, very intelligent concept. He's good. It's like it's hard for me to really. I'm so melodically focused. I like things that are melodic. I like a melody. I like rhythm. So I can connect to rhythm in rap usually, but the things that I'm supposed to appreciate in, like, flow and rhyme scheme and all that, and perhaps, the tone of someone as they sing, it's harder for me to access. But I know that anything to be enjoyed can be learned to enjoy. So I'm like, I'm enjoying dedicating myself to this thing that at first is a bit challenging for me to, at face value, appreciate. I appreciate it when I analyze it, but as I listen, I'm not like, sweet, this is fun. It more has to be kind of like vegetables, something that I know that is good for me, but I have to actively go after to really, really get into. So if you haven't, check out, like, if you just did like Deepface Kendrick Lamar video, check that out. It's crazy. Kanye West deepfake video, check that out. The Anti-Diaries, for this other one from Kendrick Lamar, check that out. And then the Arguing Couple song from Kendrick Lamar. You check out any of those and you'll have like a very interesting, artful experience for sure. Now, talking about other cool artful experiences, which I kind of knew was going to be the case, but you love it when there's something that you're looking forward to and then it 100% delivers. So a few years ago now, almost like surprisingly, I'm like, really? Was it that long ago that was made? There was this up-and-coming director, although I don't think he's really up-and-coming. Pardon me. I don't think he's really up-and-coming anymore. He's totally affirmed, he's confirmed as an awesome director, is the guy who did the movie called The Witch, which is incredible. Perhaps more recently, he did the movie called The Lighthouse, and that was with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. And then just now, he did the movie called The Northman. I believe it's Northman, like Northman, not Northman with an M-E-N. Doesn't matter. And it is this Norse, drenched in blood, historical, incredibly paced, beautifully acted, insane action masterpiece of a movie that we watched. And it was so cool, and I want to highly recommend it to people. And I don't even know where to begin. Like it's an art. There are some films. For example, I watched another film recently. It was called The Green Knight, and I enjoyed it. But it was very clear to me where it's an art film, and it's beautiful to look at, and it is entertaining, but it's less to be entertaining than it can be appreciated. Almost kind of like I was saying, my perspective on like the way that I listen to Lamar right now is like, it's less that I can really think, oh, this is sweet. It's more like I appreciate this. I know that there's creatively things that are really worth my time here. But then there's that kind of crazy thing that comes along where it's so beautiful and so artistic, and it's this great art, it's this great achievement in that way, but then is wildly entertaining at the same time. And that is what The Northman is. You're going to be completely artfully fulfilled, while at the same time with just a banger of a story that is entertaining you as well. Skarsgård, I believe, this guy, let's just talk about for a moment, like the body transformations. I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's really unhealthy, we shouldn't do that. Like, it encourages a bad sort of mindset for how people should be in whatever you want to call it in Hollywood. But okay, that's fine. But then people, I also feel at the same time, should be intelligent enough to realize that this is a guy who works with personal trainers day in and day out. Thor looks like Thor because he's working, that's his life. And Skarsgård looks like this because it is his life. And it's no less impressive. The dude is an absolute beast. The girl who, it was crazy to see her so much older now. She played the daughter in The Witch. And I want to, I haven't said any spoilers so far, so I'll just say, some spoilers now. I'm just rambling about movies I like. Basically, she was so young in The Witch, and now seeing her, I was like, oh, wow. It made me realize how much later the movie had come. Now, this is spoilers for The Witch. I was showing my friend Aya the other night. I was showing her one scene that stood out to me, that if you haven't seen it, it's the voice of the devil. Everybody, when they do the devil, it's always like this, that the devil is done with like a low whatever. And I guess that was sort of Exorcist kind of time. That was probably taken from that was popularized. But it's so boring and so done and unoriginal at this point. The voice that they do at the very end of the movie in The Witch for the devil is top shelf audio engineering, where the voice is made to sound more like whisper-like and almost serpentine. And it is one of the best demonic voices I have ever heard. One of the things I wanted to talk about as we rapidly flash through, I cannot believe how quickly this podcast has gone this time, was to talk about the pacing in The Northman. So there's this feeling like you're going to hear the establishment of a plot point, or you're going to foreshadow something that's going to happen. And your expectation when you hear these kinds of things is usually that there'll need to be some sort of development or filler that when this plot point is foreshadowed that will take place before you move to the next. But it had this incredible skill of introducing what seems like a faraway plot point in the movie, but then you jump to that next plot point, and it had a way of, the jump felt like the things that often happened in the jump were also quite jarring. So it was perfect. It was like this is a jarring event, generally speaking. That this sort of thing would happen is going to be very upsetting and very surprising. that it would happen, but then making that occur as a result of a hard jump that somewhat ignores time, then drives home that point of feeling like you were carried forward in a way that you are not yet ready and prepared for. Brilliant. Brilliant. I've seen this a couple times with, it's just stuck out to me, transition and what occurs following the transition in the way that it creates pacing in the show Atlanta. Atlanta does this like very specific thing, if you've ever watched that show, where I don't know if it continues through the whole season, but when they cut scenes, they don't blend scenes together. They cut scenes to a hard black and then emerge from hard black into something that's like usually like in the middle of happening. And what it does is, where the writing in that show is already kind of like fast-paced, moving, interesting, so on and so forth, that it really adds an extra like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You feel like you're being leapt forward as a result of that. And all it took was cutting to hard black on a less obvious time that you would cut to a hard black, and then coming out of that hard black into a new scene that's in motion. And what speed that gave was incredible. And pacing where it's not like people are talking fast. It's not like events are like anyone's running anywhere, but just the series of events, the way in which they feel like they're flowing when you make this adjustment for the way that you cut, was really, really cool. What else could I say about the Northman that was exciting? It was definitely some incredible performances from Willem Dafoe. Like, well done, man. He's just so, he's one of my, I've realized this time has gone on, I'm like, he really is one of my favorites. He's so good. It would be Willem Dafoe, Anthony Hopkins, probably, like, beyond all else, like, he's maybe my favorite actor. But just some of these OG actors that just turn in amazing performance after amazing performance. And really, I like to see where they've gone this place in their careers, that they're just doing things that they love. Like, not that I am not afforded that now, but I love seeing it in people who, like, could far more easily be going for just bigger and bigger and bigger piles of money, but instead they choose to do more meaningful projects. So Willem Dafoe's crazy in it. You know who else is crazy in it, which I didn't even at first realize he was there? Ethan Hawke. Whole new appreciation for Ethan Hawke. I've always liked him. I've always liked Ethan Hawke as an actor. He's cool. He's great. I've seen him in a number of different things that I enjoyed him in, but he is incredible in this, and he doesn't even have a ton of screen time, but he does a fantastic job. I can't speak to all of I don't know Norse history that well, but it certainly does seem like a great deal of effort was also put into kind of grounding a lot of the historically accurate details of the civilization as well, which was cool. I'm an absolute imagist at heart. I love beautiful images, and it's one of the most beautiful films, but packed full of the most testosterone ass-kicking action you could possibly imagine at the same time. It's so good. It was so incredible. Totally took me by surprise just how good. It was like one of these things, I thought it would be good, but it's going a little bit, and then you're like, wow, holy shit, this is awesome. So I want to make sure that I do due diligence and try and recommend that to as many people as I possibly can to enjoy it. This is great. Thank you for showing up to the podcast. I really appreciate you. Lots more videos going up on my main channel now as well. They've kind of had the flavor of like educational and informative, but I'm also going to have the more creative stuff going up. Follow me on Instagram. Write me at my contact at davetrippinjapan.com if you were curious perhaps to come on as a guest on the podcast. We can have a conversation about that. Hug the ones you love. I'll catch you in the next one.